This is Coaching Club TV, and for this month's Coach to Coach, I am delighted to welcome Sylvana Caloni to be here with us as we talk about ontological coaching. Sylvana is a professional certified coach with the ICF. She is a facilitator, a speaker, a leadership consultant, and an author. She also has a very long and deep history in financial services, previously as Executive Vice President of Bankers Trust, and more recently as President of the Women in Banking and Finance. So Sylvana's insights are particularly valuable in this dynamic and changing environment that we as coaches find ourselves in at the moment.
Absolutely, yes. I think the thing is, as coaches, we're not blank sheets of paper. We come with our own history, we come with our own experiences, our own perspectives on the world. And I think the fact that in my case, I was very senior in financial services, global financial services, it meant that I observed a number of different companies, be it from startup to conglomerate, and so spoke to managers, to janitors, to suppliers, customers, a whole range of people. What I came to see was just how important it was to understand how did senior management tick. And then actually that feeds in very nicely to what I do now as a coach, because I work with executives to get a better understanding of what is it that motivates them, what are their drivers, what are their fears, what are their expectations. And in order to do that, we utilize a concept which we call the observer. It sounds like it's just what do I see, but it's broader than that. Yes, it is what I see, but it's how I see my world. And how I see my world is a function of what have I learned? And I've learned from my family, from school, my gender, age, if I'm a parent or if I'm a child, if I'm an aunt, what type of industry I've worked in, what's my area of specialization or focus. They all influence who I am as an observer, who we all are as observers.
The idea of an observer is an ontological concept.
That's right.
And
yes.
that's a bit of a buzzword at the moment in coaching. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so ontological suggests that we're going more deeply in terms of understanding what motivates people or how they interact with their world. It can be much more transformational, because I guess many times we look at the idea of, okay, I want to change a behaviour to get a different result. Perfectly fine, absolutely, and that tends to happen well if practiced. The thing about that, though, is if I change my behaviour without going back to getting a sense of who am I as an observer, then under stress I'll revert to that conditioned behaviour or that conditioned tendency. So going back to the idea of the observer is really to look at, okay, what is it that's influencing the way I interact, what I can see and not see, what I can engage with, not engage with, what I think's appropriate, inappropriate. And that's a whole, not only just our left brain, logical language abilities, it's also about my moods, my emotions. It's also about how do I physically hold myself. You know, if I'm a leader, I need to be able to see the world, I need to see my domain, I need to be able to engage with people at the end of the room, etc. If I'm like this, not only is my voice box crunched, but I physically can't see. I cannot engage with. So being a leader requires a different body. And many of us don't really spend the time to look into what are my moods and emotions? How do I hold and move my body? What am I thinking? What is some people talk about gremlins or the inner chatter. So what am I telling myself about? Oh no, this is going to be another tough meeting, whatever. Or am I saying, I'm curious, I don't really know. Let's go to this with fresh eyes. As opposed to, I've got an outcome, I've got a particular way of looking at it, this is the way they are, this is the way I am. That doesn't create engagement, that doesn't create opportunity, that creates more of the same. So the idea of ontological coaching is, let's go back and look at what is it that's influencing how I'm being, and if that's no longer working for me, what can I do to become different? How do I become a leader? How to become more persuasive? How do I become more engaging? How do I become? So the idea of the becoming is that I'm like this today, this is where I want to go, how do I become that person? And there's also a distinction, I guess, between the idea of who I am and who I am being. Because people will often say, "Oh yes, no, I'm not good at," or I'm just not a techie person. Frankly, I often say that. Now, it's true. Certain people have a predisposition. Certain people are naturally gifted. But frankly, if I took the time and spent some effort in trying to learn some aspects of technology or coding or whatever, I'm physically capable, I'm mentally capable of doing those things. What I may not be predisposed to is I may have some assumption because of my family or my gender, my age, that, well, that's not really appropriate for me. I won't spend the time. There are like limiting beliefs we speak about generally in coaching. So what is it that's limiting me from attempting to become someone else? And we're trying to peel that back. I have an example from my own life. So my accent's Australian, but my family's Italian, Sylvana Caloni. And in my family, it was very important, the idea of hierarchy. And, elders could say whatever they wanted, not necessarily always terribly sensibly, but if they made a comment, you just absorbed it and respected that that was their comment. That worked in my family. That was my family set of rules. If I took that attitude, that behaviour, that worldview into funds management, I would have been slaughtered. So I had to take the view that, okay, there are times when I challenge. Maybe I don't do that in my family. Maybe in this domain, that's the way I behave. But in this other domain, I have to take on new ways of behaving, new ways of thinking and acting. So the idea of the ontological component of that is, let's look at where and how we're behaving in different areas, and do they serve us for what we're trying to achieve?
This approach of who we are as an observer, now how does that differ from more traditional coaching approaches that focus on changing behaviours in order to change outcomes?
In the ontological coaching, we look at the ways that we are, as I say, influenced in terms of what I can see. So I have like a filter. At this stage, I can see things through my fingers in one way. If I have a different way of looking at things, I can see new things. So it's sort of like, how do I change the lens? How do I change the filter? Because the filter is constructed, if you like. The filter is constructed by my family sets of rules, my gender rules, my age rules, my education rules. So in terms of some other coaching practices, the idea is, okay, it's a bit like tennis. I need to improve my backhand. Fabulous. Show me how to do that. Show me how I grip the handle, etc. of the racket. But if I don't go back into, well, what's influencing me as I'm playing tennis, which is, I'm never going to be really as good as my sister, or, oh gosh, I lost the last tournament, or, my family, we're just not good at this sort of thing. If we don't go back into that, as much behaviour as I change, if we don't look into the sort of the influences, then I'll revert to the way I've always been. So the idea of the ontological piece is, who am I being? What's influencing that? Is it serving me in whatever I'm wanting to achieve? If it's not serving me, how do we change the way I see my world? Because it is deep, it's like transformation. So like the butterfly that comes out of the chrysalis, it can't go back in. Change, on the other hand, under stress, you can revert. But if you actually are transformed, then there's nothing to revert to, because you're the new person, as it were. I think what we do as coaches is, by asking the questions, by posing things in a way that's different from the way the client currently does things or sees things or engages, where previously they wouldn't have even entertained something. It's like, well, let's go there. Let's play with it. Let's see what might happen if we actually considered that. Let's see what happens if you shift from resentment and, oh, it's a miserable day, it's cloudy, that the bus was late, and, oh, this client's a pain in the proverbial, to, I don't know, we'll see what happens. You know, maybe we engage in a different way. Maybe we negotiate in a different way. Maybe I really pay attention to them. Maybe I really listen, as opposed to, I've got this proposal they've got to sign off on. So the role of an ontological coach is really, in some ways, to turn people's lives, or worldviews, if you like, upside down. You know, poke at them a bit, unsettle them a bit, because in that unsettling, it opens up opportunities.
Sylvana, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your insights and your wisdom and your sharing. I think it's been very, very valuable. And I'm Tremaine, I'm founder of the Coaching Club, and I'm an executive coach.